capture no matter where it's.
Oh, yeah, it
Yeah.
captures really well.
Put the recording here.
When you have a Zoom, that's great.
It's got to look the part, man.
I would say so. I would say so.
Yes.
Wait, is that an H4?
And
It's really nice. Cool. You're all situated. Meg Whitholm is joining remotely right now, and
I'm gonna send her. I'm gonna put up a message on Slack for people to Slack me the questions if they're watching Zoom because my laptop's open.
Stellar. Cool.
Well, we'll start and hope that more people want to come over.
Yeah.
So are you guys kind of paying attention?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm like, well, do I ask the audience question? Do I just like, don't focus on me? So I'm very informal. I'm not like the type of person that likes to talk at people. So I like, engagement. Feel free to pop, just shout out questions if you have them. So I'm with Fair Districts PA. We are championing redistricting reform. We're supporting an independent citizens committee. So this presentation is just to kind of give a background on what redistricting reform is, why it's important. And one of the huge things I like to start out with is that until we address redistricting reform, we really can't fix a lot of the other things that we really care about, a lot of the issues that aren't getting addressed, and our representatives are not talking to one another. Our state and our House, they're kind of hit against each other and they don't want each other to succeed, and you can't get bills to pass if you can't get them all working together. So these are who's supporting this effort. We've got a lot of support from great groups like Committee of 70, Common Cause, Public Interest Law Center. We are a subsidiary, I guess, of the League of Women Voters. And I would say we're a project of the League of Women Voters. That's kind of where we got started. So what's going on in our government? Issues with high public concern, like funding for our schools, gun violence, infrastructure renewal, shale, you name it, it's not getting addressed. We're just kind of at this standstill where things aren't getting taken care of. They're not working in the best interest of the public. They're working in their own interest, retaining power. That's what they care about. So this is just, I like this graphic because it gives you a sense of, over the course of the last, 50 years, 40 years, this is decline of enacted policy. So as time goes by, they're doing less and less and less. In the present, they've been enacted like a little over 100 laws, whereas before they were doing about 800. One could argue, is that a good thing? Depending on what the laws were that were enacted at the time, sure. But they're not compromising. There's no moderate voices. They won't even discuss things. And one of the things that they wouldn't even discuss is the bills that we are championing. So you've got all this dysfunction going on. So am I shaking? Is that me shaking that? Or? No, oh, okay. So why are they so unresponsive? It's because of gerrymandering. So what that is the party in power draws the lines for the districts to benefit a particular party or candidate. And tell me if I'm going too fast, but I get that everyone's busy and I'm not the type to just keep chit-chatting. So redistricting is important because we have population shifts, we have people moving into the state, we have people moving out of the state, and all kinds of things moving around, so you have to do redistricting. I think kind of each decennial, Pennsylvania loses a seat or two because population is shifting from Pennsylvania elsewhere. So I think in this in 2020, I believe we're going to lose 1 or 2 seats at that point as well within our U.S. Congress. So they have to redraw the state lines because people move within the state as well. A lot of people are moving to Philly. Where are they moving from? Outside of other states, but also within the state itself. So they draw the state Senate districts, they draw the state House lines, they draw the congressional lines. So, and as I said, it's in response to the population shift. So this has to happen basically every 10 years. And just this bottom part basically describes the current process for the congressional maps. So they are introduced by the majority party and voted on by both houses. So what happens is basically in DC, there's these map drawers, and nowadays with all the technology we have, they're getting more and more fine-tuned with using all of our information. They use our Amazon information, like our purchase patterns. They use Facebook to tell, are we liberal? Are we are we conservative? They use all this information. They use our past voting information, and they're able to really fine tune and really draw these lines so that it can serve the party in power. So whoever's in power gets to talk to these map drawers, and then they provide the map and say, here you go. And it's introduced as a bill, and that's kind of how that goes. Whoever has the power draws the maps. And then it's signed by the governor. So last time around, we had a Republican governor, and I believe we had a Republican House and Senate as well. So all Republicans, so what ended up at that point was Republicans had the power to draw the lines. However, in previous states, Democrats have done the same thing here. And these bills that we are championing have been bottled up in committees and not allowed to move because these bills have been introduced over multiple legislative sessions, and both Democrats and Republicans have bottled them up and they just don't want the citizens to have the power, neither party. So are people pretty familiar with what gerrymandering is, and they pack and crack us? Okay, so I don't really need to go through this slide too much. I guess for the purposes of the recording, you just have these districts, and the second one, you have more purple than green, or I'm sorry, more green than purple. So compact and fair, you get 40% for purple, 60% for green. But then you start, depending on how you draw the lines, if you pack and crack, you can make things unfair. And you can even set up such that the minority party or the minority purple could actually be in power when most are green. So create safe seats. So not only is it about keeping the majority party in power, it's also about keeping incumbents in power. So we don't have the opportunity to say who we want, let's say if I always vote Republican, I might not have the opportunity to, and I often don't have the opportunity or wouldn't have the opportunity to choose the Republican candidate that I cared about. I am told who my candidate is, and oftentimes we don't cross political lines depending, but so you really don't have a choice no matter which party you align with. So you have little turnover in office holders. They generate more and more power. They get more and more comfortable. They feel like they more and more don't have to listen to us, don't have to respond to us. They have to listen to their party leadership because the leadership is who dictates the map drawings of the maps. And if you don't listen to them, they can say, I don't care about your bill. I don't, it might be great government bill. And then just because of who the person is and they didn't follow the rules on something else, they'll be like, I don't care about your bill, bottling it up, it's not going to go anywhere. And next redistricting cycle, I'm going to draw you out and I'm going to put someone in to challenge you. So you get fewer swing districts. When you get to the primaries, you have to listen to unfortunately, all across the country and especially in Pennsylvania, our voter turnout is very low. It's low because we feel like no one listens to us. Why do we feel like no one listens to us? Because they don't have to in the current environment. So what ends up happening is you get the people that are just reliable voters. They tend to be very fringe. And in the primaries, they just push the candidates farther and farther to the ends of the spectrum instead of kind of being a little bit more moderate, which no matter where you align, if I consider myself very kind of extreme to one end, I still want someone that can compromise. And I still, even though I feel very strongly to one end, I still can compromise. I can still be like, all right, I really want this thing all the way over here, but I can move a little bit to the middle, and I feel like that's more of what we need in our representative state. So we get stalemate, so we get dysfunction. And there he is, voter cynicism, apathy rises, turnout declines, nothing's, people feel like their votes don't matter. And unfortunately, in the current environment, one could argue that, they don't. So this is just, there's a lot on this, but basically the point of this slide is there are a bunch of different metrics, since Ms. Kennedy a number of years ago in the PA Supreme Court said, it's possible that we could potentially rule against partisan gerrymandering. However, like how would we do that? We need some reliable metrics. So since then, statisticians have been coming up with all these different metrics. And here's 5 metrics, and basically you see that Pennsylvania is the top in a few of them, and at least the top 5 in all of them. So we are arguably one of the worst gerrymandered state in the nation. If you care about these, I can talk about them later, but I don't know how mathy you would want me to get. And some of them I don't completely understand. So this is just like a little visual. So as you know, there was this Supreme Court case recently, PA Supreme Court case, where they struck down the the maps that were drawn in 2011 as unconstitutional. So this is a district that was prior to that judgment when they changed our lines. But the purpose of this is you see all these counties, and really you're not supposed to be breaking up counties like that. You're not supposed to be kind of snaking all over the place. And you see kind of Reading as an island in the middle there, which is consistently one of the worst funded schools in the country and one of the most poverty-stricken cities in the country. And this is just, here's that district that I just pointed to that was just on that previous slide. Here's like the one that's often referenced as the goofy kicking Donald. Again, this is congressional districts. This has since been fixed, I guess we'll say. But one of the things that I like to highlight here is how precise they can get. So this is King of Prussia area, and like you'll see that the line, and this is kind of like, this is right in here. And you'll see that the line narrows down to like this very little sliver parcel of land, which is just Creed's Seafood and Steakhouse. So they were able to adhere to the contiguous rule by joining these kind of sections through a business. Any questions so far? So this is just an illustration to kind of give you a visual of where that district was and where it's come, and kind of how it's evolved over time. So you see that it used to be pretty compact, looks pretty sane, looks normal, and then with the advent of all this technology and map drawing technology that we have today, you get this kind of monster at the end. And as I said, you have data mining. A huge part of this is money. So, one of the things that we would like to see is campaign finance reform. We want to get money out of politics. Are the people in power going to want to give that to us? No. How do we get the people out of power? You vote. Does your vote matter? Nah, maybe, right? So it's like, if we don't fix this, how do we fix campaign finance reform? How do we fix all the corruption that's going on? This is corruption. Sorry for that little messiness on the left. I should have fixed that. But anyways, so this is kind of what's all going on, and it shows that it's happening on the left and on the right. So you had Project Red Map in 2010. That's what led us to the maps that we had in place until the PA Supreme Court stepped in. And then now you've got the Democrats are catching up. They're like, no, we're going to do this for ourselves. So now they're throwing all kinds of money in to try to do the same thing. And Advantage 2020, I think, is that might be Republican as well. So they're both throwing all kinds of money into this to try to win the gerrymandering game because they both want to have power. They both want to do it. So this is to give a sense of, how this really results in issues. So 13 Republicans, 5 Democrats currently in our current U.S. House, that's our Congress. It should be, if you base it off the statewide vote, it should be 10 Republican, 8 Democrat. And I believe this is based off of the most recent vote tally, I think 2016. If you had looked at, I believe, 2012, it would have probably been flip-flopped. So we're very much a purple state. It's very much 50-50, and it's generally like 51-50, and it flip-flops. And then again, the current PA House, it should be more 50-50. Right now, it's 121 Republican to 82 Democrat. And I don't know like all the rules, but I think that that gives them the majority they need to pass anything, gives Republicans the majority they need to pass anything without any sort of Democratic input at all. And that's in our PA. So one of the things that the defendants in the PA Supreme Court liked to say was, well, why are you just mad about this now? You're just mad because you lost the election, Democrats, right? And they're aligning League of Women Voters with Democrats, which they are a nonpartisan organization. Basically, because League of Women Voters is championing redistricting reform, they want the Republican leadership that was in a party to the lawsuit are insisting that they're Democrat, and they're mad because the 2016 election went to Republicans. However, if you look at this timeline, the whole point of this is like they didn't just start this in 2018. They started it in 1991, possibly sooner, and I'm not sure. But they've been championing redistricting reform, filing lawsuits for a very, very long time. This isn't a new issue. I'm not going to go into all this, but this just kind of gives you a visual of a breakdown of what happened in this most recent court case, just to give you like all the back and forth that happened. And it kind of illustrates further the need for redistricting reform, because this costs a lot of money, all of this back and forth, and there's this headbutting, and it continues to the next slide. So, and this was only the 2018 portion of this case. This particular case was filed, I think, in the beginning of 2017, somewhere around there. Again, I'm not sure, but this is just the 2018 drama. It's not even what happened before. So ultimately, in the end, as I'm sure many of you are aware, that they redrew the congressional districts. The PA Supreme Court did that with the help of an outside expert. That was still behind closed doors. It still wasn't transparent. We demand transparency. I would argue that, and many experts would argue that it is definitely better, but the process was still messed up. That's not how we want to do it. It's still not fair. So this is, this was the map that was deemed unconstitutional. You see that kind of like crazy stuff that I showed you in southeastern PA on previous slides. This was, so Amanda Holt, back when this map was drawn, she was a party to a lawsuit. She sued because she said the map was unfair. She got out an Excel spreadsheet and she drew the maps by herself by hand and said, hey, this map is more fair. And I think she was particularly incensed. I think she's from Allegheny County, and her area was kind of chopped up and sliced and diced. And so she drew this map to be like, hey, here's a more fair plan. And she did win, and they did redraw a portion of the map, but they didn't take everything that she had suggested. This down here was an 8th grade math class. They did that as an activity in response to this, or as in conjunction with this PA Supreme Court. So the challenge was, can you do a better job than our representatives drawing the map? And as you can see, it's much more compact. It looks more fair. It's not kind of crazy and wild. And just kind of looking at a visual of a map, you can kind of see, is gerrymandering likely at play? Up in the left, you'd say definitely. Down here, it's like probably not, because everything looks pretty compact, contiguous, following the rules. And I think they were even trying to take into account county splits and municipal splits, like minimize that. So they did seemingly a great job from my semi-expert opinion. And then this bottom right one, that's the PA Supreme Court plan that was just drawn. That is going to be in play for the 2018 election. So the thought is, based off of previous voting results, that Democrats should gain a couple of seats, and therefore, you'd have more of that 50-50 split that our state really truly is, and hopefully you'd have more of them wanting to work together in Congress. But this is just our congressional maps. So I think this is getting a little messed up because it's on a map. Yeah. So I did this on IBM. So did the court case solve the problem? A lot of people are like, oh, you guys won. You got your new maps, and it's like, no, the process, the way they drew those maps, the congressional maps, was still not the process that we want. It's still not fair. It's still like, what are they doing back there? Why aren't they sharing how they're drawing these? Like, are there things that, yeah, we look at this map and think it's fair, but they haven't presented to us, like, this is why we made the decisions that we made, so that we can feel comfortable with what it is that they did. So, you know, the court case didn't change that. The problem is the process. And then it doesn't cover the PA State House and the PA Senate, which are also heavily gerrymandered. So to solve the problem, we have to fix the process. Oh, I forgot I wanted to research, because I put this presentation together a little while ago, and I was like, oh, here's a neat example, and I wrote some notes about these maps. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to tell you those because I didn't refresh my memory. So anyways, on the left, we have the PA State House districts in southeastern PA, and on the right, we have the Senate, PA Senate districts. And kind of just like visuals that you have here is like, this guy's really weird. Just the fact that it's kind of like staking all over the place. It's definitely not compact. What's this guy doing? I feel like I researched what this was. I think it was like a business. It was like a Sunoco. That's kind of combining those ones together. Obviously, so this is the district that I think this area is in District 3. This is the district that, and this spans, I think, up to like Chestnut Hill, possibly, up to North Philly. And then this is the district that I live in. I live in Manioc, 7th district. So this spans West Philly, East Falls, Manioc. I think Roxborough's kind of cut out into the District 3. It goes all the way up to Montgomery County. So that is a very heavily gerrymandered district. It was thought that was drawn to protect, who was prior to Vincent Hughes, because that's Hughes's district. I remember. I think it was Street. I can't remember. So there's thought that's.
But that's weird. Are you in the 7th district in Manioc?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in the 3rd district in Roxborough.
So you live like right up on this side.
Yeah.
So we have common interests, right?
Yep.
So you think that like we should be in the same district. And then over here, you could just see there's just like all kinds of. I mean, this 172, and I unfortunately I can't remember where this stands all the way, but like this is some weird, making it almost look like the gerrymander that we typically, the salamander that we typically see as like the illustration for the gerrymandered map that Elbridge Gerry drew for himself in 18, that was on the previous slide, but 18 whatever. So anyways, illustration of it's still a problem this is the state General Assembly maps. So Fair Districts PA, we support a constitutional amendment to create an independent citizens redistricting commission. So we have 2 bills, one in the PA Senate, one in the PA House. Senate Bill 22, House Bill 722. And I'll get into House Bill 722 in a second because some stuff went down yesterday. So each bill has Republican and Democratic support. We have 21 or 42% of the state Senate that is supporting or co-sponsoring the Senate Bill 22, and you have about 53% of the House. That's enough to pass this bill in the House for House Bill 722. So if you combine the state Senate and the House, you have 52% support in our General Assembly for this, which in theory would allow this bill to pass. But they have to get out of committee. Go ahead.
Sorry, this is a little bit of ignorance about the process, but co-sponsors means their name's on the bill.
Right.
So that doesn't mean, like, did you ask everyone to put their name on the bill?
Yeah, we are, one of our the things that we're championing is call your representatives, call your senators, tell them to co-sponsor this bill, tell them to support it. Now, I think where you're getting to is just because you co-sponsor doesn't mean you're going to vote for it. Is that what you're thinking?
Actually, I was thinking, like, well, if there's 50% of people that aren't co-sponsoring it, but they may be amenable to approving.
Yes, for sure. Some people argue, well, I don't want to put my name, this was what Senator Hughes was arguing for a little while, was I don't want to put my name on it because it could get amended to death, and then what it ends up being amended to, like, I really dislike, and it's not something that I support. But that could happen with any bill. I mean, that's the process. And then at that point, you could say, all right, I don't support this anymore. You could take your name off of it. You could add your own amendments to there's this back and forth process. So that's not really a good argument. But yeah, certainly there could be some people that are not co-sponsors that support, but just because you're a co-sponsor doesn't mean you support. So for example, House Bill 722, Representative Knowles he's a Republican. He co-sponsored, and everyone was kind of like scratching their head because he's kind of one of the hardliners in the House, and it was like, well, why? You know, that seems a little weird. We're happy about it, please, yes. But then yesterday he voted to really gut the bill, and it did. Yesterday they destroyed it. So I mean, I can get into that right now. So this was so upsetting. So yesterday was Wednesday, Tuesday, at the end of session, Chairman Metcalf, who runs the committee, he is very undemocratic in every sense of the word. He doesn't follow procedure and the rules that are in place to allow a democracy to function. And at the end of the session on Tuesday, he was like, we're gonna have a voting committee meeting tomorrow. And he alluded to talking about House Bill 722. And what they need to do is have a hearing, discussion, debate, amendments, like talk about it, get experts in there, get the co-sponsors in there to talk about it. He did not invite any experts, did not invite any co-sponsors. He alluded to talking about this bill. You're supposed to put an agenda forth to let everyone know that this is going to happen. There's like this protocol that you're supposed to follow that he did not follow. However, there's a technicality and I didn't quite understand it, but like if you don't officially close the session on Tuesday, then the session could still be open. I didn't quite understand it, but some technicality kind of quote unquote allowed him to do what he did. So Wednesday morning, they convene. He says, here's my amended bill, hands it to everyone. That's the first time they're all seeing it. No one reads it. Basically what he did was he took everything out that was independent commission related, took it all out, gutted it, and put in something worse than what we have today. So basically what we have today is, and I think this was more in regards to how our state House and Senate lines are drawn. So the way that is drawn today is you get two legislators from the majority party, two legislators from the minority party. They're supposed, in theory, agree on a fifth person to be the chair. They never do. So therefore, the PA Supreme Court steps in and assigns the fifth person to be on this commission. They're all legislators, to be on this commission to draw the lines for the PA House and Senate. And as we all know, in PA, we vote for our Supreme Court judges. So therefore, they have to run on party lines. So therefore, is our Supreme Court really nonpartisan? No. And right now, it's majority 5 Democrats, 2 Republicans. So, and I think back at the time, in 2010, it was majority Republican. So not only did they have a Republican House, Senate, Republican governor, they had a Republican Supreme Court. So that commission ends up being, at that time, 3R, 2D. In this future state, in theory, it would have been 3D, 2R, giving the Democrats the chance to draw the map. So what he put in this bill was basically, it's still in the hand of the legislature only, no independent citizens commission. And then through some more intricacies in the amendment, what would end up happening in theory is that in 2020, you would end up having 4 Rs and 2 Ds to draw the line. The way, with our current setting of the Republicans being the majority party in the House and the Senate. So he made it worse. And now it's a horrible, horrible bill. And so now what Fair Districts PA is advocating in terms of House Bill 722 is now we got to call our reps and tell them to fix it. So this is exhausting. Pennsylvania is very archaic as it comes to how things are run in our government. We don't have public referendum like California does. I think Michigan is also looking to get an independent citizens commission. All they have to do is get, and I don't want to say, I don't want to diminish what it is that they have to do, but it's much easier than our process. All they have to do is petition and get several thousand signatures, which is a lot of work, but they don't have to involve those who are in power in their process. They don't have to convince those who are in power to relinquish the power. You just have to talk to citizens that are just like you and me and just say, hey, this is really important. We need to do this. Then they can get it on and voted on in a referendum. We don't have referendum. And I think this is on the next slide. Actually, you know what, I'll just skip there and I'll come back. So for us, it's a 3-year process. And we have to convince those in power to relinquish their power. And we have to do it over 3 years. And it's I don't want to say this in a way of like, because you know, it can be very disheartening, but still like even though this is frustrating for me to think about, it's like, all right, I can do this. Like I really care enough that I can do this. Like I have the momentum to keep going and doing this. So it has to pass both houses in 2 legislative sessions. A legislative session, just conceptually speaking, is this year and next year, and then the following year it gets put on the ballot for referendum and we vote for it. So on the Senate side, luckily we have a very reasonable chair who has already had a hearing. He's following protocol. He gave a couple weeks notice on the agenda. This is what we're going to talk about. Here's the date. Here's the time. He invited experts. He invited, and this is Senator Fulmer. He's a Republican. He invited the sponsors to talk about it. They talked about a couple other bills. They got some experts in there. They had our leader, Carol Cunningham, come in and talk about, you know, why we support this. They had a couple of dissenters, so it was a very balanced hearing and very much the way the process should work. And he has scheduled a second hearing for April 24th, 2 Tuesdays from now. I think. I'm like, do I have my date straight? So I'm excited. I'm going to go to that. So it's public, it's open, it's transparent to the degree that we are able to really easily pay attention to this process, right? But it's open to the public. They live stream it. So that's something that Fair Districts PA encourages people to go to pay attention to the process. So they do amendments in there. You know, if someone says, oh, I don't like this, they talk about it, they discuss what we could do this to fix it. And then if they vote it out of committee, then it makes it to the floor, it goes out the floor, then it goes to the other house, and so on. So that's that whole process. So, you know, if we succeed in 2020, we would have this independent redistricting commission. So while there's a frustration with House Bill 722, we're still like, all right, we're going to call our reps and tell them to fix it. However, we still got Senate Bill 22, and that is going through the process that it should be going through. So we still have a lot of lines of championing that we can do. So I'm just going to go back to this real quick. This talks about the bill. So without getting into all the nitty gritty, basically what it is it's an independent citizens commission. It's going to be made up of citizens that align with each of the major parties, and then you get some independents in there, so you get a healthy mix of, and it's supposed to reasonably align with like our demographics of the state. It would be randomly drawn. There's multiple levels of pools that you would draw from. So basically, there's all these parts of the process to ensure that someone can't mess with it.
When you said align with demographics, is that code for gender, race?
Yeah, gender, race, any communities of interest. You know, any cultural representation that needs to be there. It's just the best that they can do. And the suggestion was to like have a random algorithm that would be able to kind of give weights to certain things. You look kind of like hard. It does like that. So it hasn't been outlined exactly. Like all of that would be in the enabling legislation. So this would be a constitutional amendment of like you have to reasonably represent the demographics of the state. You have to represent the different interests in the state as best as you can, recognizing that it's 11 people, right? And there's so many different people, right? So California did it, and they had I've seen at least an image of those that were on the commission, and you could tell that there were very probably differing viewpoints based off of the image.
Does California have a mandate for majority minority in their representation?
They have a citizens commission that.
I don't think they have a set majority minority representation in their commission.
I think they do.
Yeah.
Ours is very much.
I was just taking a look.
Yeah,
Okay,
I can certainly, if you want to chat with me after to give
Yeah.
to give me your email and I can follow up with it. But I'm pretty sure. So this commission was based off of what they did in California, but there were some kind of what were thought to be shortcomings. So the idea here was let's address those shortcomings and make this the most robust form of an independent citizens commission. And I think it's not quite, I don't know if it's 11, but it's not, I think it might have been actually larger, but I think that that did exist. And I might not, maybe I'm not quite following your question, but we could certainly.
Yeah, because
Because I don't want to give you wrong information.
right, because when you set lines, if the state, for example, is overwhelmingly majority Republican to Democrat, that's not fair either. To have mandated for minority for majority.
I think that's not what the language
It
says,
doesn't mean,
though.
it's not representation, that's what I mean, if you have 4 and 4, right?
I understand. I think it sounds like what you're talking about is kind of a proportional type thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because if you mandate 4 and 4, it doesn't make it well for the long term either.
Yeah.
It's not
What-
representation.
Yeah, what I will say to your question is there are many proposed solutions to address redistricting. And it's like one of the most complicated processes
Yeah.
within our government. And it's like, how do you represent this huge swaths of people, like with so many varying interests? Like, how do you do that the best way that you can? And like, I've been following the gerrymandering project on Facebook. And it's kind of like, well, what about this? And what about this? And I'm like, oh, that sounds like a good idea. And then someone's like, well, you didn't think about this, this, and this. And it's like, oh my God, okay, so that one's out the window. It's like, no, well, it's not out the window. And it's just, there's so many intricacies to it that it's like, how do you best do this so that you can best represent? And I don't, so far at this point, like this is what we feel is the best way to do it. Could there be discussions with additional experts within these hearings that could say, well, this might be a little bit better, we could tweak this, certainly, and certainly in some point in the future, there could be possibly better ways to do it, but at this point, this has been shown to work the best in other states that have provided us an example, although recognizing that there's still some shortcomings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does it really matter, in your opinion, what the solution is? Isn't the real problem that, for example, it gave one person to anti-democratically gut the entire bill? And so no matter what the proposal is, it only really matters if you're able to implement it. And what do you think about that?
So, I agree with you. One of the things that, while you have gerrymandering that favors one party over the other, there is a school of thought if you anger the populace enough, and you could possibly get a turnout strong enough that could override that gerrymander. So gerrymandering makes the odds much, much more difficult. It doesn't make them completely impossible. So like the thought process with Metcalf is, and unfortunately he doesn't have a Republican challenger, and that's part of this messed up process. It's like they don't want him to have a challenger, they want to protect his incumbency. But there are 2 Democrats running against him. So it's like, hopefully the citizens in that area, Republican or Democrat, are like, this guy is just, he's not representing any of us. And while, say, I might align Republican, I might at this point have to, choose the best Democrat that more closely aligns with what I believe in. I mean, I know that's a tall order because of the divisive nature of our current environment, but it's kind of like, and also one can hope that maybe, for those Republicans who aren't willing to kind of shift to the other side just because this guy is so horrible that, I'm like, I don't know if I should be saying that, whatever, I said it.
We're pretty much all Democrats who are here.
No, it's being filmed but no, I don't, well, we're not out to talk bad about any particular senator or representative, but he's just not democratic, and to me that's horrible. But you would hope that they're just so frustrated with him, those Republicans that are not willing to kind of move to a more reasonable stance, at least in that. And by reasonable in this stance, I more mean the candidate that doesn't quite align with them, but at least is willing to adhere to democracy. That those people might be so incensed that they might stay home. So there's like, so I mean, this is part of our problem. When I said earlier, unfortunately, we don't have referendum. We have to convince those in power, and it's horrible that he represents a district of 65,000 people. We are a state of 12.8 million people. He was voted into office by, it was either 11,000 or 20,000 people. So someone who was, and in the primary, I think in the primary it was, let's say it was 5,000. I don't quite have like the numbers perfectly, but the point is that he represents like 0.5% of the entire state, and he gets to decide what all of the citizens in the state want. That is not democracy. But yeah, it's a frustrating catch-22 with having those in power, and it's so it's like try to turn out the vote to get him out or keep pressure on the leadership. So Mike Turzai is he the leadership in the House? I think so. Keep pressure on him to be like, this guy is not doing the job. Do you want someone who is very undemocratic leading this committee, and keep pressure there to?
You do anything else other than asking people to phone in?
We have some things at the end, which I am like will be happy to share with you. Go ahead.
I've got a question that's coming from Will, who is watching this remotely.
Okay.
He's curious to know how this party representation actually works. Like when you say majority and minority party, does that mean like Democrats, Republicans, Independents, or does that also include people who might say that they're Marxists or Libertarians or Green Party?
So yeah, so you have majority, which right now, I don't know if it's based off of registration. Registration, Democrats would be the majority. So our majority minority parties right now are Democrat and Republican. That's not going to be written in there because maybe and hopefully in some future state we don't have this two-party bullcrap because most of us are independents anyways. And then you have the third pool, which is kind of those who are smaller. So yeah, it would be Libertarians, Greens, Marxists, Independents, whatever. Yeah. And obviously, again, you have 3 from other parties unaffiliated. So the best that you can to represent those particular groups would be how you would do that.
So a question on that: if that's by representation or registration, like if you're registered.
Don't hold me to that. I'm not certain
Right.
if it's
But let's say it was.
Okay.
Let's just say it's registration. Then can it just not be by registration and not have it marked as specifically 4, 4, and 4, or 4, 4, and 3?
What do you mean demarked?
Like basically it moves as representation moves.
Right. So this commission would be in place. I think in California when you are added to the commission, you're in the commission for 10 years. Although your really nitty-gritty hard work is in that first year where you're drawing the lines. So yeah, as each 10-year passes, it's like you would look at that time and say, all right, who's our majority minority, and it would be based off of that point in view or that point in time view, and that would be who would be in place for that 10 years. Yeah.
And I want to say that the language, it's not phrased, I think, exactly this way. I think it says, there are a certain number of people who will come from the largest registered party and the second largest registered party, and then the rest together. So it doesn't necessarily specify, it will be 4 Democrats and 4 Republicans.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it doesn't make,
It doesn't make sense.
yeah, this
Four
doesn't
and
have a bunch
four.
of meetings, it's the same, it doesn't matter if it's majority and stuff, it's the same, but it does
Yeah,
matter
it's-
if there's this growing third party.
Yeah, let's say there's
Right.
4
Takes
parties.
place.
4
Yeah, so the
parties.
majority minority, that was just to make it, because it's a lot of words to say 4 from the largest registered party, then 4 from the second largest registered party. So that's kind of how we just put that in there. So there's all these additional rules to preserve the impartiality. So the idea is you couldn't be a lobbyist, you couldn't have served in the legislature, your wife, your husband, your partner. There's all these different rules to basically, and I don't want to say they couldn't have been in the legislature. There's years around it. It's like you can't say you could never have been in the legislature, right? But there's a number of years around it to basically make sure that you are as best as possible, not someone who has a self-interest other than you're citizens of the state and you care about our democracy. So you'd have transparency. It would be, there would be strict rules for transparency. You'd have a lot of public participation. There's a strict timeline for completion. And I think there's some of this outlined within the constitutional amendment, but I'm sure that they would leave some of that for the enabling legislation. And then you have additional rules for fairness where you can't use voting records or party affiliation. You keep the legislature out of it. Their hands are, we don't want those in power drawing maps to keep themselves in power. And then you still have the PA Supreme Court at the end. If there's like aggrieved parties, you can't kind of get away from that. So someone asked, what can we do? Perfect. So we have a lot of local working groups. Amanda and I are part of the Northwest Working Group. There's a Center City Working Group. There's a South Philly Working Group. We have working groups all over the city in the different sessions. So you could go to our website, and I believe there's a section. It's pretty. The website's pretty easily navigable. So there's a section where you could find your working group, and you could align with that working group if that's something that you would be interested in. We plan group events. We generally meet once a month. We do stuff like this, where if this is something that you're interested in, you could present. We go to fairs. Basically, just any way that we can educate citizens. That's what we try to do the best that we can. And it's also nice. I really love our working group. We all get along very well. Like we actually just sometimes we'll hang out separately from the fair district stuff. Of course, that always comes up, but it's a nice recognizing organization.
It's also
if you're
all volunteer, like all the way up. So like it's really grassroots, and I have not been involved for a super long time, but like you can just show up and start doing stuff.
Yeah, it's like whatever you want to do. Like, and there's like behind the scenes stuff if you don't kind of want to get into presenting. Maybe that's not your cup of tea. But for example, and this isn't the most exciting, but we have people. We have been collecting names on petitions to present to our legislators. So, and there's multiple ways that we do it. You can go online and sign the petition. Basically, it's saying that we care about this. We want you to support House Bill 722 and its former state and Senate Bill 22. But when we sometimes collect names via paper, so people have to do data entry. So, and another thing that we're doing is May 15th, primary day. We are going to be sending people out to strategic polling locations to get people, to educate people on their way out of the polls. We don't want to bother them on the way in.
Sorry, this is an important business
Oh,
call.
no worry. So yeah, get them to sign the petition so we get more names that way, more involvement that way. A really huge thing is this coming Monday, we're doing a rally day, April 16th. So if anyone has the flexibility, we have about 600 people start coming so far. There's some buses that are leaving from Philly to head to Harrisburg. And that's going to be in the Capitol Rotunda. Again, it's a Monday, so I know that could be difficult with work, but and that's a really exciting opportunity too. It's just you feel like you're doing something. You can meet with your legislators at that time. They're going to be in session. They may be on the floor, so maybe you could talk with the staff. But it's also a great day of camaraderie. And there's going to be other educational things going on, so we encourage people to come if they can. If you're a member of an organization, endorse us. Or if you know someone who runs an organization, endorse us. If you know an organization that would like a presentation to educate more people, that's kind of how we get people that call the representatives. We get people to kind of join our organization that way, and most importantly, educate. So, talk to me after, and we could set up another talk with your organization. Follow us on Facebook, Fair Districts PA, Fair Districts PA Philadelphia. Sign our petition online to say, you know, as I said earlier, that you support this. There's the information on the rally day. Also, up here we have postcards. So sometimes it's just really easy to just pop a postcard in the mail to your representative, your senator, and that's another way. So, and that's not, you know, basically there's a lot of ways to volunteer with this organization. So if you sign up with emails with us, you don't get spammed with a bunch of emails. Carol, our leader, sends out bi-weekly updates. They're always very informative, and they say, hey, this is the action we're going to be taking this week, or this is the next thing we're going to be doing. They're very easy actions. So if you can't come to rally day, sometimes it's like, all right, we're all calling Chairman Metcalf to like give him a piece of our mind today, right? And that's, you know, if we all kind of do that at the same time, it really shows him that we're paying attention. So the emails are the best, or I would say the best way. And the emails and Facebook are the best way to find out what is it that we're doing and what are we championing at this moment, and give you ideas for action. So the way I got involved was I was like, well, I care about this, so I'll just join a working group. And then when I joined the working group, they talked about different ways you could get involved. I was like, well, I'm not really comfortable giving presentations, so I'll just do legislative visits. I like to talk to legislators, so that's what I did. And then it became, well, oh, we're in a bind, we need someone to present. And I was like, all right, I'll do it. And then all of a sudden I became presenter. And then you find out all these interests. I've been to basically all the PA Supreme Court cases. Luckily, my job is very flexible, so I think similar to yours, that I can kind of disappear in the middle of the day and go take part in some of these things and work at night. So I like to go to the Supreme Court cases. I went to like kind of all the Commonwealth Court cases. I've been going to the hearings. So it's like really, once you get your foot in the door on the small thing of signing up in the email, you can find out what interests or what things are going on that would really align with your interests and that you could pursue. Because I think oftentimes when we present this, it's like, oh my God, I have to do all these things. It's too much stuff, right? So just join the email list and then find out what it is that what you're interested in.
May I ask you another question?
No.
Sorry,
You just asked your question.
yeah, right, I know. I'm just curious about your funding model and your technology infrastructure. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, where are you getting that? And, okay, right. is that
Donations
all
are welcome.
donations? You don't have outside funding or like a personal investor?
Sometimes organizations give us money, they donate spaces, but really it's donations, and we're volunteering our time. Whenever I buy things for art, it's my money. It's like, you know, so we're very much grassroots. We don't have a huge funding source, and we rely on.
For the organization, if there's not enough money?
I am like astonished. So we just have so many, like our website, volunteers. They volunteer their
That was
time.
my question also.
Yeah.
Who made your website? I guess I'm a volunteer. But what about other technology? Do you use any other technology tools to help you organize?
I'm not so privy to the technology side of things. Like I know that we use like Action Network for our emails. I know that there's some primitive tools like Sign Genius that we use to kind of, do you have?
I feel like this is an area where more expertise is generally needed. I know one of the projects I'm working on with our working group is a little bit more like just event coordination kind of stuff, and being able to like collect information about events where fair districts might be and actually connect those events to the people who can present at them. Like, and even that is still like a pretty rudimentary, like get on the horn or email people and like just work it through. That takes like a very individual effort right now.
Yeah, what I will say is when I first started this organization, I was kind of like, oh my God, we're all over the place. Like it's cohesive, you know, ideas. And it just like, I'm just amazed at where we are with how little that we had, how little that we had to start with, and how, you know, we don't have a whole lot of funding. And it's just amazing. The grassroots efforts has really made this organization a really tight organization and has allowed us to do a lot with little. So as we get more people coming into the organization and volunteering whatever their expertise is, so in the emails, she'll sometimes, it's almost like a help wanted ad in the email, like in the very bottom, it'll say, we're looking for media experts. And people will just volunteer their time. You don't need to pay them because they're helping you. They're giving you their time and their expertise to build this thing for you to And I mean, that's kind of where we're at. So it's really about people donating their time is more where we get it from, but like, for example, we definitely need funds because not every, you know, if you, so, okay, so you have a web expert. Well, they need a server and a platform and all these things to kind of, so you need some money to kind of host that server, but you cut a lot of the cost out by having these experts kind of doing the work piece of it. Also, in terms of like our working group, for example, monetary donations help us if we have to pay for a table at a fair to, because not everywhere is free to be able to get out and educate. So yeah, that's where we're at. I feel really good about where the organization is at with how little it has. I think you'd be really surprised if you kind of got involved and saw like all the things all the things that are going on.
But Fair Districts has grown enormously since the general election too.
I
Like
mean,
it was a tiny little group of people, and it's like mushroomed to thousands of people,
I think
and
we-
yet still has managed to maintain like some sense of cohesion. And I think that just really speaks to the fact that people who are involved, they like really do care about this and are really remarkably on the same page about a lot of things.
Yeah, and there's about I think 20,000 followers on the main Facebook page, and then I think our petitions we've gotten like 25,000 signatures,
yeah.
which that's not the same people that are on certainly there's a good bit that are the same people that are on the Facebook page, but there's a lot of people that aren't on Facebook or don't even really email and use technology. So it's very well. We are often cited in media, in news articles, because we are kind of pretty we're getting or are already pretty well renowned within the state for our grassroots efforts in championing redistricting reform. I think yesterday we were in Philly Inquirer, I think. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes.
Thank you.
Have you thought of, I mean, I'm just messing around with the idea though, but have you thought of removing the human out of the equation? Meaning like, I know 538 does it all the time, and if you ever play with their tools, they just read, the
I did
algorithms.
start to play with their tools once, but then I got sidetracked and I actually forgot about it. But so you can't completely, and if anyone wants to grab up, we would love for you to take some postcards and like either give them to friends or like mail them into you're up here on the table here. And if you wanted to sign our petition, that's up here too. I don't have enough information to be able to say exactly why you can't completely eliminate the human element, but computers can only do so much, and there is some amount of human involvement that needs to consider what is going on within the communities to determine, the computer might say, well, the line makes sense here, and it's like, well, no, it doesn't, because, this is an agricultural area, and you just, lump the city with the rural area. That doesn't, this is a very crude example, but that doesn't make sense. No, you need to, so I need to tweak the line to move here. There's a campaign that is being championed by Committee of 70, and specifically, I think Chris Satullo is really doing a lot of championing. It's called Draw the Lines. And that's kind of, I'm really looking forward to doing that. It's kind of like a really geeky thing where they built this tool. It's supposed to be really user-friendly. In theory, anyone who knows how to use a computer could use this tool. And it uses the algorithm to build the map. You first enter some data that is necessary for it to build the map. And then you play with it and you tweak it to make the map better, to make the map as best as you possibly can to best represent the state. And they're doing a competition, and I think it's going to be segmented like school kids, let's say middle school to high school, and then universities, and then kind of the community at large. And each bucket is they're gonna have a competition, and there's like a couple $1,000 prize if your map is chosen as the best map. So I really like that idea as a way of educating us for those of us who are really geeky and want to, you know, for the type of people that would want to join an independent commission, this would be a tool that might be really interesting. But I feel like once I take part in that, I'll understand more about why it is that the human element is really needed. But you know.
Yeah, because the argument of 538 is because of the data that we have now, the fluctuation, migration, demographics, human element is not needed. It takes greed out of the equation.
You said it's not needed.
Not needed. It takes greed out of the equation.
I mean,
greed is, like you said, the motivator of everything.
Yeah. I
So-
mean, one could argue that, okay, so in my crude example, it lumped a city with a rural area. One could argue that, like, well, you don't have any interests, you know, there's no special interest in that, so it is what it is. Like, no one could, so one could make that argument. Would that still result in the best representation? And I don't, yeah.
Someone still has to decide what the parameters are.
Yeah.
That's the
Right, the
thing.
human element is now the humans who write the algorithms, people.
Right.
Right.
Oh, yeah, that's actually one of the biggest points that yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's cool. Like if you want to just respect sort of the current district borders, you could just use that, and then the legislature deal with that. But you know what I mean? There's a lot. You're right. There's a lot. There's like configurations
Well,
that
and it
humans are
gets
involved.
tricky too, because one of the things that has to happen is that the districts have to be of equal size in terms of population. So like that leads to having to dice things up somewhere,
Yeah.
and deciding where is sort of the crux of the whole thing.
Yeah, so it's like, which municipality do I split? You know, which county do I split? Which one makes the most sense? And the computer might say, oh, over here, but you're like, that makes absolutely no sense at all. It should be, this is the one you should split, because this one kind of, the communities of interest kind of diverge a little bit in this particular county, whereas over here, everyone in the county has similar interests. You know, yeah. It's fascinating, all the myriad of solutions. There was another one that I wish I could tell you about it now, but I don't remember what it was. But I looked at it and I was like, "Ooh, this is really interesting. Maybe this is like the best thing." But I'm sure there's some caveat to it that's like, "Well, you got to think about this. Think about this." Nothing's ever black and white.
I have another question.
Okay.
What would you say to someone who says, oh, the stakes are so high that we should be willing to use any means necessary, including anti-democratic measures such as redistricting in favor of, you know, let's say Democrats, right? So
What do you mean states are so high?
the stakes are so high. So for
Oh,
example,
stakes.
the stakes are so high.
Okay,
You know,
gotcha.
Trump being president, everyone is getting more involved. I don't think that people get really excited about redistricting. I think what they get excited about is things that are affecting their personal life. Here, things they hear about on the news that are like really bad, right? So what would you say to someone who says we shouldn't be advocating for fair redistricting rules? What we should be advocating for are redistricting rules which help, you know, our side. Like,
Well, which one is our side?
well, in this case, I'm going to say this example person is a Democrat who wants the Democrats to get
So-
power.
I liken this to like, and this might be very, very crude, but a relationship. I have the best ideas. My ideas are the best. And I know this is difficult to say in the current environment, given some of the really terrible things that are being done and said. But I still have to liken it to like, I'm right, and the other person's like, no, I'm right. So I think about our parties as a relationship, and they're so divorced from one another that they're kind of like, they're on their respective sides and they're just digging their heels in, and whatever the other says is wrong. So I understand the point of view that you're coming from, and I think they are so divisive because that's what keeps their place in power. If they divide us, the citizens, we can't unite to take back the power to ourselves. So as long as they're like saying the most horrible things or whatever, or just being very divisive, and they're doing it on both sides because they want to both retain their power. And one could argue different varying degrees of horrible divisiveness on each side. They're still both doing it, and the point is to divide us so that we think we hate one another, when it's like, oh, like you just want to live a happy and healthy life too? Oh, I didn't really, like I didn't consider that because I'm busy worried about whether you care about dreamers or not. It's like, really, if all of us really think about it, we want ourselves to be happy and healthy, and we want those around us to be happy and healthy.
Well,
And
And gerrymandering, like, because we're first past the post single member districts, it's one of the things that drives, like, first of all, that we have two parties in the first place is a systemic issue, which is made worse by gerrymandering because it pushes the two poles out.
yeah,
And, like, that means that it's really hard to rearrange the issue space at all. So we end up with really weird things. Like, you end up with someone who will characterize themselves as pro-life, but also pro-death penalty, which is a really weird combination,
pro-life,
and you
but
never
also-
get to reshuffle them because the two parties are so far out of the polls.
can you say it pro-life, that and?
And pro-capital punishment.
Yeah, okay.
Like, that's a fairly common alignment. And it, like, at least philosophically, is really odd.
Yeah.
If you ever want to nerd out about, like, systems and why we have the number of parties we do, like, that's what my undergrad degree is in. So,
I would like to nerd out on that sometime. We should have
Okay.
coffee. I don't drink coffee, we should have a drink.
yes.
Yeah, I certainly align to one very specific perspective, and I think that my perspective is the right one. But I also don't want to be so divided from those who are on the other side of the spectrum that I'm not willing to discuss with them, because we are being told to hate the other. We are very much being told to hate the other side, and that's by design. And that's to keep us so that things like this can't get fixed. So, I think if I was understanding your question correctly, to address the other part of your question, Pete, one of the reasons why I like to kind of open up and say, whatever you care about is not going to get done. Like the larger, I don't want to say single issue, but let's just say single issue for the sake of conversation. They're kind of all rooted in a couple of things. I don't want to say it's just redistricting reform, but it's money in politics and
I would say also our
Yeah.
closed primaries is another
Yes.
thing that really
Yeah,
drives us too.
there's a couple of like really just rudimentary governmental, although one would argue that
System level problems.
Yes, thank you.
Systems, not
Thank you.
issues. That,
Yes.
that drive our divisive situation.
yeah, and that drive the systemic issues are what are keeping the single issues from being able to be addressed. So if we don't if we don't fix the underlying systems, the things that we care about aren't going to get addressed, and also they're not going to be encouraged to bring us together and say, all right, so you think a little bit differently on this, and when they bring up like immigration and wanting to, it's because they want us to hate each other. So it's like if you kind of fix these underlying systems, it'll be like, okay, so I have a reason to be like, hey, we're all kind of the same, and instead of demonizing people, you'd be like, no, we're gonna talk about helping people. But that's not the goal. The goal is not to bring people together and to realize that we're all kind of the same. The goal is to find some niche, to demonize a particular group of people, and that way we're not focusing on what's not being addressed for us, we're focusing on demonizing people.
Again, with the first past the post single member districts, like when you have
What
two
is
parties.
first past the post single member?
Okay, first past the post means that the person who gets the most votes wins. Single member districts means that you elect one person from each district. And because that is the system that we have, the person who is the median voter, regardless of where they fall on whatever spectrum you have, that median person is the one who determines which party is going to win. And that's generally something that drives people toward the center. But when you have things like gerrymandering or closed primaries or a number of other like structural systems in place, you can end up with a really polarized environment where there's nobody basically at the middle of that bell curve, and you have these two extreme parties out on the wings. And that's basically the direction that we've been moving in for some time.
I'm just curious.
Don't look all downtrodden. Keep that smile. We'll fix it. With your help.
What do you think the probability is that in 3 years you're going to have that constitutional amendment passed?
Made more progress than we have in a while.
I have to say, we made more progress than I had expected. I was like, there is no way that either of these bills are going to be heard in committee. And I say that like lightly because I was like, I am still very hopeful that this is going to happen. I'm going to be but I was like, if we don't get there, that's okay because I know how hard it is. So, it's not 50-50. I would say it's probably more on the less likely end than the likely end. But there are many tools in the toolbox of things that we are working on that no matter what, like if this doesn't happen, there's something else that we're going to figure out. There's a couple other bills that are out there for redistricting reform that aren't our favorite, but they would be moving in a better direction. So this is the thing that we care about the most. And there are, we are not a rigid organization. We are going to champion the thing that we think is going to be the best fix, but we are not closed-minded to other possible solutions. So it's, if this doesn't happen within the 3 years, in that 3-year span, so the first time it has to pass is this summer, July
6th.
So if that doesn't happen, it's not like we're like, oh, all right, done. It's like, all right, so what's our next thing? There's something else that we can do because we started out, I wish I remembered how many sponsors, but when we started out, there weren't very many sponsors of either of these bills. And it was within the last few months that so many of our representatives were jumping on board. I mean, we even got Senator Hughes and Street that's a
they know that
huge
there's
deal.
one guy who can just sabotage the whole thing, they hold a claim, then they can just do whatever they want, right? And tell you whatever they want.
That's why we got to keep paying attention
Yes.
and keep our momentum up. That's why we got to recruit more people, get more people to care about it, get more noise.
Get more people to treat it as a voting issue.
As an election issue.
I know, and I remember,
No.
I just remember during the primary, I would explain to people, that election is rigged. And no one, unless you were very supportive, the election was not rigged. I mean, you were totally brainwashed, the election is not rigged. And now it's anything, Putin rigged the election. People don't believe that elections are rigged. And then you say to them, oh, well, gerrymandering.
It's a form of
And then
rigging.
you're like, oh, well, yeah, but I don't really want to talk about that or think about that. And it's just like, there's this huge disconnect that people accept that gerrymandering rigs the election, but they can't, their brain isn't able to understand that elections are rigged.
Well, systems are vulnerable to certain things, and in the case of the system that we have with single member districts especially, it's very vulnerable to this kind of polarization through this specific method. But there's actually some really interesting cases of gerrymandering in other countries with different systems. Most notably, Northern Ireland is a really good example where one party lost an enormous amount of power due to a redistricting effort. And even though they were proportional representation, they were basically able to gerrymander it by controlling the number of seats that were assigned to each district. So systems are vulnerable to these kinds of attacks. And we're seeing that in our own. But it's difficult to make those decisions about how you structure your government. And it's certainly something that people didn't really know or study extensively when our Constitution was written.
No.
So to a certain extent, we have to try to work inside the system that we have in order to fix these problems when we find them.
And the more noise we make, the more people we get rising up. Not hopefully, things will change eventually. I don't know how long it'll take, but luckily, this is a nice organization to work with. It's nonpartisan. So I should have said that up front. Well, whatever. It's a nonpartisan organization. We have people aligned with across the political spectrum, and it's kind of common goals. So it's an organization that you're with that it's I'm good with being with this group for the long run because I really like everyone, and our leader, she is fantastic.
Carol
she is
is really
wonderful.
smart.
She's sweet. She's smart. She's caring. She used to be a pastor for a church. She's a great woman, and so she's easy to follow. She's easy to, yeah.
And my experience for districts is remarkably nonpartisan. Like, I went to the hearing that was on March 27th, and I definitely sat next to a Republican, and we had some very enlightening conversation. So.
You had I talked to the Trump supporter.
Yeah, I mean, my parents are Trump supporters, so like it's kind of nice to have that, like you can actually have conversations with people who are on the other side when you can come together on like something that's not like an issue in the broader political discourse right now, but which is about changing the system to make our government more responsive.
And with these elections, so I was at a polling place that was in a district that I didn't generally align with politically, and I spoke with people on the other side, and I was just like, I'm just here to listen. I'm not going to judge. And once I take that judgment out, they just wanted to talk, and no one that I spoke with, for the most part, said anything divisive, or it was kind of like, I just want a better life, and I'm making the best decisions that I can, with the information that I have. And it's like, yeah, we all want a better life. So, yeah.
Well, thank you for coming.
Yeah, this was awesome. Thank you for all the questions and the engagement. I really feed off of more like interaction. So,
Kevin, thank you for recording.
No
yeah,
problem.
thank you.
So it's very unlikely I'll post the entire thing, but the 722 thing was, I think, the most interesting.